give them inspections.
Can I ask a quick question? So the IDs for the caregivers, what information about the patient is on the caregiver's ID?
The patient's ID number and the grow site.
Is there a physical location or just a number?
No names.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a number to match the gross site.
Yeah, it's on the card. Where the cannabis is being grown. So don't lose your card.
I mean, let's be realistic. If you're out in the open,
Yeah.
we know you
The
exist
caregiver's
already.
address, the
It's
grow
printed
address
right
is
on
on
the
the card?
All right,
Grow
next
site,
question.
the address is on the card?
Yeah.
That's a
I have a couple
hazard.
questions concerning about the inspections and about the advisory committee that you're talking about. I'm wondering, are you going to be asked, is it within DHHS's powers to accept voluntary inspectors, such as law enforcement volunteering to inspect?
Like a deputized.
Like some, well, basically, this.
No.
Okay, so
No.
no.
How about on the committee?
No.
On the committee.
On the advisory committee, I suppose, somebody may say that they want somebody from the Division of Public Safety or the Department of Public Safety there, but police. No, I think that would be unwarranted.
John, just something I would want to be really clear about. Your current understanding right now is that because it's only 2 people doing this.
Right.
If all of a sudden the head of the Maine State Police came to you and said, "I know you don't have people to inspect. We could do the inspections."
I would not accept that, and I know Kathy Cobb well enough to know that she wouldn't too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But is there anything in the law protecting us from something like that? A patient? Someone entering their home?
I never looked at the law with that. Yeah.
Well, the law says, that law enforcement can have access for law enforcement purposes.
Okay.
I don't, this again hasn't been litigated or anything, but it seems to me that inspection isn't a law enforcement purpose, it's a regulatory purpose, so.
If, let's say a law enforcement agent obtained records from DHHS and then made an arrest, would that evidence still be able to be used in court? Because is that illegal for them to obtain an address or information in that way?
Sounds like
Oh, exactly.
I would say that it would be a breach of confidentiality.
Like, does anyone have any liability? Who's left holding the ball with this one? If the police do get,
that we pushed for wanting access with a warrant. That did not happen. Again, it's law enforcement for law enforcement purposes. How that's actually defined or how that would play out.
so they can enter anyone's home if there is any
reasonable cause.
Well,
they,
let them
get a warrant.
Yeah, but
No, I don't mean let them in. I'm
Law
saying
enforcement
without a
always
warrant.
can have probable cause, but in a warrant. But it's what level of law enforcement purpose is required to access these records. I don't know the threshold answer to that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's been how
Patriot
well
Act.
it's been tested at this point.
Igor, Patriot Act.
When the Department of Health and Human
Subversive.
Services comes to inspect, I'm lucky enough to have a separate building, so you guys probably aren't gonna come into my home.
Right.
But what about, let's say he grows it in his basement, are you gonna inspect his whole home, or are you just gonna inspect the grow operation, or do you know yet?
Well, I've made inspections in dispensaries, and I've gone to the grow rooms. I'm not interested in a dispensary at this point, and I don't see any reason to treat it differently in going to individual caregivers either. I would be interested in going there to inspect the cultivation, nothing else.
That's with 24 hours of notice too.
Yeah.
I had a question about the fee for the registration for caregivers. Do you ever see that price going down? Have there been talks about that? Because $300 per patient is kind of hefty.
Yeah.
Especially if the caregiver puts it back on the patient to pay.
And yeah, I haven't brought that up with anyone yet. And I don't know what the mechanism will be, but I believe that after these rules and regs have been in effect for a year, the legislature is supposed to re-examine them, right? And I think that would be the proper time for
What was how did you come up with $300 per patient, or who came up with that?
Again, I feel that I don't have, a real good background on this, because until I took the job a couple of months ago, I don't know how things were negotiated, how things were finalized. And
believe
even
that
what
was
I
the
was saying
Berkeley
about,
patient group.
the dispensaries, I'm not sure that there were people saying that we have to protect the dispensaries. But when I read it, I think of, now, what is the reason for not wanting the caretakers to collectivize? And the only reason I can see for that is because then what would become the difference between the caretaker, who pays a $300 fee for his patients, and the dispensary, which pays $15,000. So, so that's,
Unlimited.
so,
It seems like the state's trying to encourage a monopoly, and I don't know really how else anyone else would interpret that. And I mean, is there a reason that caregivers shouldn't try to form a union and then maybe, decide to sue the state for, protecting the dispensaries and preventing us?
I think that would be other people's calls. I will say, like Arizona just passed a law, they just voted for it, but there's going to be 128 dispensaries in Arizona. And I don't know if they even have the concept of a caregiver there. I don't know what that was all about.
They do.
Do they?
Is there any reason though that do you know of a reason why they would prefer dispensaries over caregivers?
No, I don't. That's what I'm saying. I don't have. I wasn't paying attention at that time, and I don't know what the reasoning is for a lot of.
Glenn asked earlier, husbands and wives, can we grow in the same house?
You can grow in the same house.
Separated by a fence.
Well, it doesn't have to be a fence, but there should be some separation.
If
Real-
would it be
There should be.
Would allow for the sharing of resources, lights,
would it
etc.
be enough to label
Even
each
for
pot
indoor.
distinctly? Like if you share the space, but these are Patty's 30 plants and these are Ron's 30 plants, and each 6 has a name on it specifically, and would that be enough of a separation where if you were to come in, you could identify pretty clearly whose plants were whose?
Let me email an answer to that.
Is that limited to husband and wives, or is
Yeah.
that really?
I mean, that makes it easier than building
If-
walls.
If they're growing together,
Share
If
space
my
in
wife
this-
and I
in the same
share, we're
physical
both
address?
caregivers, we share the same address, we share the same space.
What-
Is it
what
really necessary
roommates?
for a husband and wife to actually
Or a
build
gay
two
couple.
separate grow rooms?
and that's, I want to talk to someone else about it, because you're already asking the question, well, if 2 people live together, can they do the same
And do they
thing?
have to live together?
Right.
Or can they just be 2 people sharing resources, thereby?
Okay,
They
but
have to be the
see,
same
that's,
house.
that, what I've said, I've sort of said that the main medical use of marijuana program needs to have some separation there between 2 caregivers who are, the plots can't be commingled.
As long as they're just
Or
physically
can-
separated. that's
right.
something.
Whether they're
Right.
married, whether
Whether
they're
they're married or just friends
Right.
from college.
Right.
I mentioned married only because it's an extreme example.
Right, no,
Okay,
exactly.
That's all.
For me.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'll,
You
I'll
know,
give you an answer.
I'll
think
tell
that
you
this-
to-
Oh, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say that some of what you're kind of alluding to can you then start to get just caregivers that are associated with each other growing in the same facility. That's one of those issues that I think is really blurry right now, and I would imagine is going to play out, and it's really being watched by not only caregivers but law enforcement and neighbors in neighborhoods that are really worried about what they fear to be ramifications of having something like that in their neighborhood or in their community. So I think that's some of what communities like Lewiston are trying to address. I've had individual members of law enforcement come up to me and say, oh, we don't know what to do about this issue. So, and I think you all are getting a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
So what people can do, and in these sorts of situations and how far it can go, I think is something that's a little bit unsettled at this point.
And that's another reason, besides dispensaries, why people may be, putting this obstacles up to collectivize caregivers.
under the veil.
I think that, the issues with patients and caregivers in terms of amounts of marijuana or drying or this sorts of confusion, some of what I saw last year in the legislature, I know a lot of you guys were there, was a lot of education that needed to happen again of the legislators and of the people on the task force that were making these decisions. And the best way for them to be convinced that this is important is for them to be hearing about, you know, people that are ill, that are needing this medication, that are finding problems, either with access. The whole point of, you know, the people that voted for the referendum and the people that voted for the law last year really did want to increase access for patients. I do believe that. And there are some problems that really need to be fixed, and I think there are some things that are not okay in the law, again, especially things like, you know, we're not still okay with inspections of people's homes that are you know, caregiving, but at least patients that grow for themselves are not subject to inspection. But things like the amounts, in the end up criminalizing patients and caregivers, because if one part of the law allows you to grow this amount and the other part of it says, but then you can't hold on to it, or you can't do anything with it, or then again, if there are patients out there, I know I heard from a young woman who is has, you know, really severe pain and chronic problems, and she, you know, says that she has to kind of eke out the amount that she uses to not be able to actually adequately manage her pain, or else be in violation of the law. So those are the sorts of stories that people need to hear about and that need to be brought forward, and that's what's going to change the laws and change the regulations. It seems to me like we have really somebody that's got some open ears right now as far as the policies go. So I think people should take advantage of that for all intents and purposes, and to continue to pay attention to what's going on in the legislature and what bills are there, and try to take some action. There was the task force was created, the law was amended, it was very publicly done, there were a lot of people watching it, and I guess I wouldn't just think that would have come out if it was a way to go against it. But in terms of, you know, what can be done to, you know, we're really looking at what can be done to protect the affirmative defense. And again, I think there's the two routes to go. There's, you know, the affirmative defense, and then there's voluntariness of the registry.
So there is still those two options then?
No. I'm saying in terms of what one would look to try to do to bring back some protections for.
Yeah, well, like, what
caregivers.
should we call our senators? What can we do now to let them know that affirmative defense needs to be here, and that we're losing our freedoms, etc. You know.
Yeah, I
go
think
on this.
if any of you know that your if you want to contact, you know, the elections are over, contact your senator and your representatives if you feel comfortable doing so, and, you know, say you're really concerned about patients and caregivers being exposed to criminal prosecution and conviction after January 1st, and that's not what you believe that the people voted for, and you don't believe that that's what is right for patients and caregivers. And if they seem supportive, please let me know so that I can be, you know, trying to be in touch with them, and you can know that there's an ally there. And I guess conversely too, it'd be good to know if they, you know, if they're not supportive of that. I think this is really, you know, patient privacy and patient confidentiality is something that a lot of people really do care about on both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. And we'd like to garner that support that hopefully is in place to get back some of the protections that were changed before they even hit the ground.